What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, October 23rd, 2017, start of a brand new week here. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We are currently seeing the beginning of some major thunderstorms coming over the island, and hopefully we won't get knocked off the air as has happened previously, but you never can tell. So we'll try and get as much news done as quickly as we possibly can. Obviously, the big news is, or should be, the Uranium One scandal, Uranium Gate, if you want a name for it. And the corporate media is still stonewalling the whole issue. ABC and NBC have yet to report on it. CBS, 5 days after it broke on Fox News, they finally decided to give it a whole minute. Ooh, a whole minute. Wow, yes. Not getting anything past those guys. Now, let's talk about our little informant. This is the guy that the FBI had inside all of this, who documented all of this corruption and bribery and influence seeking that was going on. And he simply referred to his confidential source one. His identity is being withheld, which is a very, very good thing. But apparently through his lawyer, Victoria Tonsing, he's now out there saying that he literally was threatened after wanting to offer details linking the Clinton Foundation to the Russian bribery case. He was actually being threatened. Now, here's where it gets rather dark and murky here, because London Center for Policy Research President Tony Shaffer was talking about the uranium deal with Lou Dobbs, and apparently Attorney General Sessions refuses to lift the gag order on this informant. He's prevented from speaking by something that's loosely called a non-disclosure agreement with teeth. Sessions has the right to void that agreement. He's not doing it. Once again, the wagons are circling around the establishment as a whole, because I'm sure the message has already gone out from Hillary. You investigate me for this, I'll blow the whistle on all the drug smuggling that's been going on inside this country. All of the drugs brought in with U.S. government approval and sold to the children, I'll blow the whistle on all of that. And that would bring the government down. Interestingly enough, though, the foreign media is really starting to look into all of this stuff here. Article that came out of the Daily Mail about how Hillary Clinton was using the Clinton Foundation as sort of a personal piggy bank. They were using those funds to pay for the personal consultant Huma Abedin, a $34,000 a night Caribbean holiday for daughter Chelsea, payoffs to silence Bill's sex accusers. And the story just basically goes on in where it's not really a charitable foundation at all. It's a slush fund. Now, Jimmy Carter just had an interview with the New York Times, and to put it all together succinctly, basically came on out and said the Russians didn't alter the election, Obama didn't deliver, we didn't vote for Hillary, which is really what came down. And Hillary and her people are still out there trying to blame Russia, find some way to link Russia to her defeat. She's out there making all kinds of personal appearances. You know, she's campaigning. We don't know what for, but she's clearly in a pattern of campaigning. Yes, part of it's to sell her book, which is not doing all that well. But she was on Saturday's Graham Norton program on the BBC. They gave her like half the show to basically rant on about all the people who betrayed her and how the election should have been hers, and so forth and so on. Now, Tony Podesta and his company, the Podesta Group, are now under federal investigation by FBI Special Counsel Robert Mueller in connection with the Russia investigation. This is coming out of NBC News. Now, this is not a good thing. We know that Mueller is part of the problem. He was part of the Uranium One deal. He's Hillary's protector. He's Hillary's axeman against Donald Trump. So the main reason he took over this investigation into the Podesta Group was to prevent anybody else from having an investigation. And that happens a lot of times. It happened all the way back on the Kennedy assassination, which was technically Texas jurisdiction. And the government swoops on in and says, we're going to have a high-level investigation. Give us all the evidence. Give us all the lab data. Give us all the forensics, and we'll take it from here. And, of course, they turned around and lied to us. So that's why Mueller is taking over the investigation into the Podesta group. Because, I mean, what's he really going to do? Really investigate? That would just hammer home the fact that the real Russia collusion was with Hillary and her people, not Donald Trump. And Mueller's job is to tarnish Donald Trump. So he's taking over the Podesta investigation to make sure it stays buried. Meanwhile, Maxine Waters was speaking before a group that benefits homeless LGBTQ youth. Boy, there's a niche market. And Waters vowed to go and take Trump out tonight, which drew a lot of applause from the people in attendance, should draw the attention of the United States Secret Service when you go on out there and make these kind of comments. Now, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to turn out over to the war zones. There's a lot of stuff going on over there. Now we're hearing that ISIS may surrender that eastern bank of the Euphrates to the U.S.-backed forces. See, here what's going on. The Kurdistan gambit has failed. But the U.S. has not given up on finding a way to partition Syria and make sure that the part that Assad is left with doesn't have the oil, doesn't have the money. And it's utter hypocrisy when you look at how the U.S. wails on and on about how Catalonia can't be split off from Spain and Crimea should not have been split off from Ukraine and, you know, territorial integrity. And now the U.S. is in Syria, clearly intending to grab hold of part of it and not give it back to the Syrian government. So now there's going to be a negotiated surrender where ISIS is going to surrender the eastern bank of Euphrates, not to the Syrian government, but to the U.S.-backed forces. Now, we're also hearing that the U.S. is considering that Raqqa needs to be a new independent zone within Syria. And there's not much left. I mean, if you look at the city of Raqqa following all the U.S. bombing, it's practically wiped off the face of the earth. It's been carpet bombed. And drone footage looking down on it from above, it very reminiscent of when the United States and Britain bombed Dresden in Germany in 1945, which is generally considered to have been a horrendous war crime. So it's ugly. Now, according to an article in TASS, Russia is of the opinion that the coalition, meaning mostly the United States, wants Raqqa to be a Syrian center outside of Assad's control. So they're getting ready to break Syria into pieces, which that really is an act of war. The U.S. has absolutely no legal foundation for it. They're not even supposed to be there. U.S. forces, U.S. allied forces, have taken control of Syria's largest oil field. Everybody's running for the good land, for the oil, for the resources, trying to create facts on the ground, a new border inside Syria. And the U.S. allies get all the oil, and Assad gets the dirt. Now, Israel keeps on attacking the Golan Heights. Syria has informed the United Nations that this should show a collusion with these terrorist groups that have been in Syria. And even worse, Israel is saying they're going to escalate the attacks onto Syria because the claim is errant artillery shells from Syria have landed in Israel. They didn't hit anything, nobody was hurt, nothing was damaged. We've seen this pattern before. Israel wants permanent ownership of the Golan and all that oil and gas underneath it. They're already drilling it out and selling it. Now, Rex Tillerson is out there screaming about Iraq, and now that the Kurdistan project has pretty much failed, Rex Tillerson said it's time for Iranian foreign fighters to leave Iraq now that the Islamic State militants are nearing defeat. And then he goes on out to say the foreign fighters in Iraq need to go home and allow the Iraqi people to regain control. Really, does that mean the Americans are leaving Iraq? I didn't think so. The complicating issue is that Iraq has asked for Iran's help, primarily in dealing with the Kurds. Iran is in Iraq at Iraq's invitation and permission. Now, up in Afghanistan, where things have not been going good for 16 years, the CIA is adjusting its Afghanistan strategy in what continues to be an open-ended campaign to tackle terrorism, or at least that's what they're saying. But the CIA is expanding its covert operations in war-ravaged Afghanistan. And they're sending in some of their highly experienced officers and contractors, and they're calling them counterterrorism pursuit teams. Well, the problem isn't terrorism up there. The problem is they can't defeat the Taliban. And I think in Afghanistan and in Syria, the U.S. is continuing the fight, not with an expectation they're ultimately going to win, but to avoid the impression that they have actually lost. And they don't care how many of other people's children they're going to send to their deaths. It's important to maintain the image of the invincible American military. Now, as you know, there is still a big, huge stink going on regarding Donald Trump's decertifying the Iran deal and dumping it on Congress, which is likely to impose more sanctions, which would effectively end the deal. And Trump is still out there saying, well, all we want is for the IAEA to start inspecting some other sites that were not part of the original agreement. And Russia is out there saying the IAEA is not authorized to inspect Iran's non-nuclear military sites. For one thing, they're specially trained to look at nuclear facilities. There's nobody there that is really an expert at looking at ballistic missile construction. And again, the deal was IAEA access to all Iran's nuclear sites. The U.S. would lift sanctions. Iran is fully in compliance. The IAEA says so. It's the U.S. impiling more sanctions onto Iran that is in violation of the terms of the deal and the spirit of the deal. Now, a lot of other countries are really cool on this idea of losing the Iran nuclear deal. Polls are showing the majority of Americans think it's just fine the way it is. And a lot of Europe are saying, we really don't want to change things. We like the deal the way it is. And so Trump is taking a belligerent tone. He's out there saying, we don't need you on this. Saying the U.S. will unilaterally apply pressure to Iran without the help of the EU. And that's because a lot of those EU countries are ignoring the U.S. sanctions. And Trump came on out and saying, well, if we'd been insistent, Europe would have supported our sanctions, but we allowed Germany and France to keep making money with Tehran. Did you get that? Trump allowed Germany and France to keep making money. That's a very dangerous, bordering on megalomaniac comment to make. Tillerson is out there trying to put pressure on Europe, warning against any investments in Iran. What's Iran going to do? They're going to get investment from China and Russia. They're not thinking this all the way through. The harder the U.S. throws its weight around all over the world, the more and more countries are being bullied by the U.S., turn to Russia and China. They don't want to be part of the American-based economic globalism anymore. It's just not working for them. And that's because the U.S. used its privileged status as holder of the global currency to abuse other nations, to covertly influence them. They weaponized the private central banking system. Now, over in France, Hollande is saying that France will continue to protect their interests in Niger. All of a sudden, everybody's waking up to the realization there's a lot of war going on in Africa that we were not told about. And so basically, there was an attack on a uranium plant run by nuclear reactor maker Areva in the northern town of Arlit earlier on Thursday. So we're going to go in there and cooperate with the Niger government to fight against terrorism and protect our interests. Mostly it's about protecting their interests. Remember, Niger is next door to Mali, and France is already in Mali. They invaded right after Germany demanded repatriation of their gold, and Mali just happens to be one of the largest gold producers in Africa. Funny how that works out. Meanwhile, the Pentagon, now that it's known that we have wars going on all across Africa, they're using the ambush in Niger that killed 4 U.S. Special Forces members. Basically, it's forced the Pentagon to admit they're routinely carrying out ground patrols inside Niger, but hey, as long as we're on the subject, we need a much, much bigger budget, for AFRICOM. We don't have the resources. This never would have happened if you'd given us more money. Actually, it never would have happened if you'd stayed home and minded your own business. A little bit of good news coming out of the Philippines. Philippines has destroyed the ISIS presence. The Battle of Marawi has been won, and it's all over and done with. And basically, this means that the U.S. has lost any rationale for going into the Philippines. Remember how that all came down, where Obama went down to the Philippines and said, no, you don't want to treat your drug dealers like this. We're a humane country. You don't hit the drug trade like that. And President Duterte said, yeah, it's our country. We're going to do what we want to do. Then all of a sudden, ISIS shows up. They're making a mess, and the U.S. is talking about intervention. Well, not going to happen. The Philippines got ISIS out of their country. The most alarming talk, however, is coming over from the war hawks regarding Korea. An article coming out of CNN, no less. CIA Director Mike Pompeo said the United States has to act as if North Korea is on the verge of being able to strike it with a missile and act accordingly, and that President Trump is ready to do so. In other words, they're not going to wait for North Korea to actually do something, because North Korea isn't going to do anything. All they've been doing is testing. But we have to act as if they're a threat to us. Well, that's what they said about Iraq and Saddam's nuclear weapons. That's what they said about Syria and his sarin gas. How many more times are you going to be lied to until you're willing to stand up and say, I am sick and tired of being lied to, so that this government can send young people off to more of these wars? Because that's exactly what they're talking about. This is another ginned-up attack on a nation that has not actually done anything. The only threat is that North Korea, or for that matter Iran, won't do as they're told by the U.S. government. It sets a bad example for all those other provinces. Meanwhile, following the exercises they had off the Korean Peninsula last week, the Ronald Reagan has now visited the port of Busan in the southern South Korea, arrived there Saturday, and I guess it's going to hang out for a while. But apparently this exercise included 2 carriers, fighter jets, helicopters, naval ships, and submarines. So it was serious, serious business. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Getting on back to Afghanistan, Afghanistan's former president, Hamid Karzai, El Presidente de UNOCAL, is now approaching Russia and asking for their assistance to save Afghanistan from the Americans. Talk about a reversal there. Meanwhile, over in Korea, the U.S. Air Force is preparing to put nuclear-armed bombers back on 24-hour ready alert. This is something they have not done since the end of the Cold War in 1991. And basically, the B-52s will return to a ready-to-fly posture, not seen since the Cold War. 24 hours a day, ready to fly on a moment's notice. It's getting very serious out there, folks. It's getting very serious. And remember, for all this talk of Iraq's nuclear weapons and Iran's nuclear weapons and North Korea's nuclear weapons, only one nation in all of history has ever actually used nuclear weapons of mass destruction against the civilians of another country, and that was the United States of America. Okay. Now, getting on back to Israel, new development there. A lot of people have been looking at all these investigations and corruption allegations and possible indictment of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it's a huge embarrassment for the Israeli government. They're already out there screaming this is just a plot by the anti-Semites. Now, apparently, the Knesset is looking at a bill, they're calling it the French bill, that would exempt the sitting prime minister from all investigations. If this passes, this would effectively yank Netanyahu out of this mess of corruption probes. Now, Avichai Mendelblit and Shay Nitzan, Attorney General and the state prosecutor, are lashing out at this, saying ignoring real criminal suspicions harms the state, can lead to the gravest consequences. Yeah, it can. In a mature republic, nobody is above the law. Unfortunately, we're seeing it all over our country. Hillary Clinton was above the law regarding Title 18. Now Netanyahu's going to be above the law regarding his crimes and corruptions. Now, getting on to the economic news, apparently the U.S. government ran an almost $700 billion deficit so far this year. It is spiraling out of control and reaching catastrophic levels. There are red lights flashing all over of an imminent correction. They can't keep propping up that stock market the way they have been because the stocks are so overvalued. That's a severe downward force on the price of a stock is its real value. The U.S. government is hopelessly in debt. They could never, ever pay it off. And, of course, that is by design of the private central banks. Because while they're in operation, they generate more debt than money with which to pay the debt, and that is the trap. That is how private central banks enslave nations. And we need to wake up and realize that private central banking is not about the community, it's not about the people, it's not about the nation. It is all about their own wealth, power, and control. And that's exactly what's going on here. Wealth, power, and control. We all need to be private central banking heretics. So, seeing more indications of retail closures. They can't even stretch it out into the holiday shopping season, which I guess is just about, well, it's sort of underway now. If you go into the malls, they've got decorations and stuff all over the place. But it will really crank up as soon as we're out of Halloween. Thanksgiving, just a road bump. Just a road bump. But Claire and I were looking at our local mall, just all these retail vacancies. They can't keep stores in that mall. Nobody's got money to buy stuff. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in Spain, the break between Catalonia and Madrid is widening. Basically, Madrid is exercising part of their constitution to reimpose direct control by Madrid, taking away Catalonia's autonomy. And it's being described as the worst attack on democratic institutions since Francisco Franco was in power. And he was a hardcore fascist. So basically, Catalonia is saying they're going to proceed with a declaration of independence. And even more than that, Catalan authorities are saying nobody in Catalonia are going to follow any orders that come from Madrid anyway. So everybody is definitely dug in there. Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has announced plans to basically fire the region's government and curtail some of the powers of its parliament. And the Catalan parliament will meet on Thursday to decide on their response. But I think, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, it's going to end in bloodshed. Catalonia is not the only place. You have Italy, the Lombardia region, and over by Venice are about to have independence referendums. Everybody wants to break free of the globalists, and the globalists are fighting back just as hard as they can. George Soros just transferred another $18 billion, with a B, of his own fortune into the Open Society Foundation. So they're getting ready for a big, dramatic push to try and resell the entire world on what a wonderful place this will be if we're all under a single global government. And we know that is a flat-out lie. Because the larger a government gets, the larger a country gets, the more abusive of the people that government becomes. We're seeing it in this country. We're seeing it in Brussels. The European Union was supposed to be a free trade and free travel zone only. And over time, Brussels has just grabbed more and more power and authority, intruding into more and more of the member states' internal politics. And then member states aren't liking it. And a lot of them are now straining at that leash. So I don't know what George Soros is going to do to try and reverse that, because everybody is seeing the economic damage from the ECB, and more, they're seeing an attack on their culture and their history with this flood of these refugees. And they are just causing all kinds of problems. Now, interesting story out of Jihad Watch. Apparently, there was a Muslim migrant, Sarbast Fatah, who was convicted of raping this woman, and she actually got part of it on her cell phone recorder, where it said, no, I don't want to, no, I don't want to. So with open and shut evidence like that, yeah, he was sent to jail. He's out there saying, well, really, it wasn't rape. This is all cultural differences. And I just didn't understand the British law, because apparently in this migrant's hometown, rape is considered okay under certain circumstances, or at least that's what he's trying to claim. I'm just behaving like a normal Muslim. Well, here's the big problem with all the refugees, and for that matter, the illegal immigrants. They're not interested in integrating into their new homes. They want to turn their new home into what their old home was, the one that they ran away from. Shows you how much sense this all makes. But no, Teddy Roosevelt said it perfectly. If you want to come to the United States of America, you are welcome. But just understand a couple of things up front. This is the United States of America. We have one language, English. We have a work ethic. And we have U.S. laws. And you will comply with all of that, or you're not welcome. And unfortunately, when in Europe, the refugees are out there saying, no, you have to change your country to be just like the one that we left. Well, if it was all that good, why did you leave? Now, over in, Nashua, New Hampshire. I used to hang out there a lot when I was a kid. Mohammed Rafiq, he's 27 years old. He's a Muslim refugee from Burma, also called Myanmar. He's been in New Hampshire for almost 2 years, still does not speak any English whatsoever. And he's been busted for pedophilia. Apparently, he tried to kiss and fondle 4 girls between the ages of 7 and 12. And Nashua, New Hampshire, is one of Obama's welcoming cities. Yes, we're welcoming you into our town. Don't bother learning English, and here, help yourself to our children. It really isn't working out, and they're trying as hard as they can to keep people from talking about this stuff or thinking about it, but it's failing miserably. People are starting to look at the world with their own eyes. They're not waiting for the TV set to tell them what they see, what they hear, what they think. We were talking the other day about this poll that was taken of what are Americans most afraid of. And obviously the people who commissioned the poll, they were hoping to find that Americans are most afraid of ISIS or most afraid of the Iranians or the North Koreans. Nope. The vast majority of Americans are afraid of their own corrupted government. By a huge margin. All those other things, ISIS, North Korea, Iran, way down in the list. And the fact that Americans are now aware of the true nature of the government, I think that counts as a victory for the independent media. Because certainly the corporate media is not going to put anything out that would make you question the government or challenge any of those precious beliefs. Remember the big stink over election fraud? When Trump first brought it up last year, and the entire corporate media said, how dare you even say that our elections are anything but 100% honest. Remember, Obama came on out and said, no, there's no possible way the elections could be rigged. And boy, did they change their tune when Trump actually won. Yes, the election was rigged. It was rigged by Russia. Jill Stein, we're going to have a recount here. And then Trump came up with his Commission for Voting Integrity. And then all of a sudden you have these same people saying, no, don't take a close look at our election system. Really, it's racist for you to do that because you're going to be targeting the illegal immigrants who, by the way, are not supposed to vote in the first place. Last count, thousands of confirmed incidents of massive election fraud in last year's elections, and it had nothing to do with Russia. Because all of it that's been found so far benefited Hillary Clinton. And maybe Trump would have been very happy with Hillary winning the White House because he's got her over that Uranium One deal. She is wide open to blackmail. That may be the reason she worked so hard to return those 10 arrested Russian spies to Russia as quickly as she could. That right there proves she's totally compromised by her own corruptions. Now, Doug Jones, he's the Democratic candidate for December's Senate special election in Alabama. And apparently one of the things he did recently is he spearheaded an effort on behalf of a legal group massively funded by George Soros. And the agenda of this group was to fundamentally transform the role of U.S. attorneys from one of prosecuting criminals to activists that enact a so-called progressive criminal justice agenda. In other words, he wanted to turn them into social justice warriors. Forget about arresting and prosecuting bank robbers and rapists and things like that. We're going to go on out. We're going to chase down those people who use the wrong gender pronouns. That's the new American way here. Okay, so let's see. What do we have here? As you know, the censorship against the independent media, the internet, is starting to break out into the open. And a lot of this is being championed by the Anti-Defamation League. And the ADL has already succeeded in making partnerships with Google and Facebook to team up against truth seekers. And we're starting to see where history is being erased. It's being rewritten. It's right out of 1984, Winston Smith. Yeah, we got to rewrite this. It makes the government look bad. Amazon is starting to ban certain books from their catalog. They're putting pedal to the metal. They're trying to complete their transformation of this country into a fascist dictatorship because now they're aware people are awake and seeing what's going on. Now, this is a very scary story. The former commissioner of the Federal Election Commission, Anne Revelle, has proposed an insane new law that seeks to punish readers of news with libel. That's the readers of news with libel if a story is deemed false. Now, who decides whether it's true or false? Obviously, the government. And so she basically put together a document, a position paper, titled "Fool Me Once, the Case for Government Regulation of Fake News." And the goal is to improve voter confidence. So they're scared. You can see it with every one of these moves. They're scared. They're finally realizing the government and the corporate media have lost control of the minds of America. The vast majority of the American people have awakened. They've had too many lies, too many frauds, too many hoaxes, and they want things to change. They're simply not believing the government and the corporate media anymore. And our government and our corporate media have gotten by with lies, fraud, and deception for so long, they've forgotten any other way to run a country. And now we're seeing, because of the Uranium One deal, the entire structure really is corrupted top to bottom. The reason Donald Trump was not able to find some decent people to hire onto his White House staff is there were none available anywhere inside Washington, D.C. Trump should have gone outside the Beltway. There are highly qualified people who can do the nuts and bolts tasks needed for running the administration. They're not compromised by past associations. They're not open to blackmail or bribery. You should have brought them in. The reason Trump could not drain the swamp is because basically he was hiring the alligators in to be the White House staff. It's an epic fail. And I think a lot of people are probably joining with me in their utter disappointment of Donald Trump. We did not get the Donald Trump we voted for. We got just another puppet figurehead who's pushing for more war, more money for the rich, less for you, to keep you helpless and powerless so the government can go on doing what it wants to do. Unfortunately, I'm seeing so much disconnect and discord within the government, it's not really clear what the government really wants to do. It's deeply factionalized. And you've got this faction wants to do this part, and this faction over here says, no, we got to do this. And I'm sorry, Donald, that the job isn't what you thought it was going to be, but you did want the job, and we did help you get it. But especially with the war policy, this is not what you promised us. You promised the American people who voted for you in sufficient numbers to overcome the election fraud used against you, that we were going to get out of this global intervention business, bring all of our people back home, and start working on rebuilding this nation and its infrastructure, because it is in terrible, terrible condition right now. We're in a wartime economy. We've been in a wartime economy for over a decade. And that means every bit of wealth that gets sucked out of the people gets sent to buy bullets, bombs, bandages. And our nation is being allowed to rot with neglect. The fire breaks aren't being kept open in California. The aqueducts are being allowed to leak millions of gallons of usable water into places where it's not needed. The roads are cracked. The rail system fragile. We've got dozens and dozens of bridges and dams, which experts are saying are on the edge of collapse. Because all the money is being poured into that war machine. And when we lose that war, as I fear that we will, even if it goes nuclear, we're going to be left with a country that doesn't have an infrastructure that can support easily the rebirth of industry and agriculture, non-GMO agriculture. We're rapidly devolving into third world status. Our entire economy is based on illusion, market rigging. It's beginning to appear that America's military might isn't all that mighty, except for the nuclear weapons, and everybody's nervous about those. Our media does not inform. Our schools do not educate. We're really showing all the signs of being a fascist economic dictatorship. And Americans need to wake up and realize that. So, I don't know what's going on with Trump. I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's been compromised or threatened or bribed. But I think he got into that Oval Office and it just played with his head. And he's out there repeating Richard Nixon. You know, I am the president. When the president does it, it's not illegal. It's very hard to watch this happening to this country. I've been watching it closely for almost a quarter of a century since I started the blog, and a little less intently for all of my life. And I can tell you, this is not the country that I knew when I was young. And maybe I was living in a world of illusion then, but the illusions are over and things are looking bleak. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I noticed the corporate media is putting a lot of focus on this ambush in Niger. Looks like they're trying to whip up support for we've got to go into Niger and deal with ISIS and Al-Qaeda there. Let's take some phone calls here. Bob in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael.
Good afternoon.
Simple things from out here in farm country. When it comes to immigrants, if they don't understand our laws to begin with, maybe they shouldn't be here. And secondly, if they don't respect our laws, maybe they shouldn't be here. Thank you, Michael.
Makes perfect sense to me. Makes perfect sense to me. And like I've mentioned before, there have been times when I've gone to other countries on film projects and such. And when I go, I try and learn the language ahead of time as much as possible. It's just respectful. And yes, I'll go through the book and make sure that there aren't any laws that I might accidentally stumble across. Some places can be very strict. Down in Indonesia, if you litter, you get caned. But it's your responsibility to know that going in. The same thing applies to the illegal immigrants and these refugees. When they go into Europe or the United States of America, they are responsible for learning what life is like in their new home. To know the laws, to respect those laws, and not think that everybody's being racist because you're not being allowed to live the way you did in the old country. It doesn't work that way.
It's just common sense, no?
It is.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, and again, at the heyday of immigration in the U.S., give us your tired, your poor, your teeming masses yearning to breathe free and all the rest of it. It sounded really good, but the reality was everybody coming to the country had to go through Ellis Island. They had to be checked for contagious illnesses. They had to be checked that their documents from their home country were okay. People got turned back. People got sent to quarantine. It wasn't really open borders. Open borders have been a disaster. And the only reason it's still out there is it's being promoted by this New World Order agenda to try and blur everybody together, to erase our cultural identity, our sense of our own history, to make it easier to control us. They just want a giant planetary blob of humans. That's what's going on here. All right, we're going to start a phone call with Dustin in New Jersey, but Dustin, I'm going to have to take you to the station break. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, they want to control the world. That's why they reduce our cultures to nothing, a blank slate. Cattle, all the same cattle. They can control us easier. No, we have no faith, no future, no nothing.
All right, Dustin, stay on the line. We're going to take a station identification break here, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and we're talking about, well, all kinds of things, immigration, the Air Force. So why don't you just pick up where you left off?
Yeah, Mike, it's like working in a cubicle. Everybody's the same, overruled, have an overseer. That's what they want. Well, they want everybody to be the same.
There's another aspect, okay? People who have a strong sense of who they are, a strong sense of their home, their community, their history, they're going to be more willing to oppose outsiders coming on in and trying to take over the place. If you have already erased that emotional connection between people and the land that they're on, it's going to be a lot easier to displace them with military force.
And that's why you have the younger generation in schools being brainwashed because, by the time they get our age, they're not going to really know anything but diversity, and it's just a code word for control. It's just a simple. These people don't care about diversity or women's rights or, all you have to do is look at Hollywood and Harvey Weinstein and, Democratic Party, Republic. They don't care. It's just those are talking points and a way to, for you to, look at that, like the football thing or this or that. It all comes down to they're in control. That's why those who make the rules rule.
Yes.
Look at, like your previous caller, Mike, he just said, the illegals don't want to follow the rules and stuff. Well, not only they don't follow the rules, but our own leadership in this country don't follow the rules, a.k.a. Hillary Clinton, James Comey, the Bushes, all of them, because they don't believe in the rules, that they're higher than the rules. And it's just not just them, Mike. It's the Western world, Mike.
Yes.
The Western world has a rot to it. And it's just a shame what's going on, man. I don't know, man. Every day I wake up, I'm like, man, I hope it gets better. But you know what? Like George Carlin says, it ain't going to ever get better. And he was a prophet for that stuff.
Yes, he was. He was. Putin,
hey, Mike, what?
Before we go on, Putin made an interesting comment the other day. He said that when a nation loses its morals and ethics, it's actually worse than having a nuclear bomb go off in your country. It takes a lot longer for you to see the damage, but it is going to happen, and we're seeing it around us in this country. At the decay, at the rot, poor construction, poor products in the stores.
Decadence, Mike.
Yes.
Exactly what happened to the Roman Empire. Decadence, a bread and circuses mentality. Some people have a good German syndrome. They don't care, or they get their pension and they go on their vacation. They don't care. But you know what? At the end of the day, everybody's going to get hurt by it. Even like the person who don't think they're getting hurt right now. Everybody's going to get hurt.
That was the lesson of the good Germans. They stayed silent. They just turned a blind eye to what was going on around them and figured they would keep out of trouble, and they wound up losing their entire country.
Yep. Hey, Mike, real quick on what's your take on the nuclear-ready B-52s and B-1 bomb? What do you make of that, like, all of a sudden?
Well, it's basically Major League saber rattling, where they're going to keep these aircraft on ready-to-fly status 24 hours a day, which is something they did all the way back in the Cold War, but they haven't done it since 1991. So at this point, it appears to be symbolic. What's really alarming is in reading some of the stories about this, they're not just aimed at North Korea. All of a sudden, the U.S. seems to be bringing their nuclear arsenal back online to use against anybody who's going to be an upstart. And my guess is probably they're going to be aiming some of that at Russia, who was our nemesis in the last Cold War. And that's what these people want. They want a new Cold War with an American people who are so scared of the Russians because of all the propaganda they see on TV that they forget all about our own domestic crime, corruption, It's been going on. We cling to the legs of Big Daddy government and say, save us, save us, save us from the evil Russians. Here, take my money, take my children. And I don't think it's going to work this time because the American people are much more sophisticated. They're much less naive. Again, going back to that poll, the majority of Americans think the biggest threat that they face is our own corrupted U.S. government. So it does seem like a bunch of these old Cold War fossils are really starting to reassert and say, yeah, we're going to go back to having missiles and bombers on alert. It'll be fun.
Hey, Mike, what was his name who did Driving Miss Daisy?
Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman. What was the name of that group? That was before that was Prop or Not. And now there's a one in Britain. You know, that one in the UK, there's a new one. And they're, going after RT. And, anybody who follows RT is Russian propaganda. And remember they listed Ron Paul.
Yes. Liberty
Report. As like as working for the Russians, basically.
They said the same thing about me, my website. That was in the Washington Post. WhatReallyHappened.com is an arm of Russian propaganda.
These people are sick, Mike. Just ideology is sick. I don't think they're even kidding around, really. I think they're really mentally sick.
Well, I think they definitely qualify as sociopaths. There's no question about that. And I don't even think they really have an ideology. It's just, they're out to grab wealth and power. And if the nation is going to fail, they're going to grab all the wealth they can for themselves before it all falls apart. We have a coffee cup we sell over in our online store. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And it almost seems like we're there right now. Because, frankly, a new Cold War is not going to save our economy. Our economy has been allowed to lose its productive base, manufacturing and agriculture. And the only thing that's holding our economy together is those runaway printing presses at the Federal Reserve, a manipulated stock market, and those few remaining nations that are still using the U.S. dollar for global trade and banking. That's it. There's nothing else out there to hold this up.
Yep, that was it, man. 2007 was the end of the cliff there, Mike. The jobs ain't coming back. I'll tell you that. For 99%, those jobs ain't coming back ever. They're on their last legs. That's all they got, like you say, is the money printing because it's over. It's over. The good times are over, like right before the crash of 29. We're the roaring 20s. Remember that? We had our roaring 20s. We're at the end of the line. And, all right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dustin. And before we take more phone calls, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The corporate media is still going on about this ambush in Niger, and they're now out there saying, well, we have to be in Niger to fight extremism, which is another way of saying we're fighting terrorists, blah, 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 blah. The reality is Niger has huge uranium deposits. Remember when they had that forged document that tried to claim Iraq was buying uranium yellow cake from Niger, which they didn't need to do because Iraq also has huge domestic supplies. But Niger has huge uranium deposits, and for some reason, the U.S. government is dealing with an unexpected 20% shortfall in domestic uranium production. And that is more than likely the reason we're there in Niger at the moment. All right, let's take another phone call. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine.
I just want to tell you something. I just saw the movie The Godfather Part 2, and it shows really good scenes about Ellis Island. When a foreigner comes in, what he has to go through. It's talking about Don Corleone when he was a much younger person.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you a question. What do you think of the speech that George Bush did on Trump?
Okay. Well, again, we're seeing that narcocracy. They're all standing up to attack Donald Trump and keep the focus off of what was going on with the Clinton Foundation, because they're all afraid if that starts to unravel all the way back to the CIA's drug running in Arkansas in the 1980s, that is a scandal that really will bring down this government. And so everybody's on the attack. That's why Maxine Waters is out there saying, I'm going to take him out. They're scared out of their minds because they're all open to indictment, prosecution, and jail time for their various participations in all of these different corrupt schemes. One of the really frustrating things about this so-called Russia-Trump investigation is all of the people involved with that were also involved in the Uranium One deal. And that's why they were so scared when Donald Trump won the White House. They were engaged in all this corruption and all this bribe-taking and all this multi-million-dollar slush funds in the sure and certain knowledge that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president and there would never be any investigations. And that's why everybody panicked when Trump won. Because all of a sudden there's a president in the White House who, at least at the time, appeared could not be bought. Would not, he'd campaigned on putting Hillary Clinton in jail. We're still waiting to see that, by the way. And so that's why they absolutely panicked. And I'm sure that they've done everything they can to compromise him and control him. That appears to be succeeding. But it's all starting to come on out here, especially when you have these foreign newspapers are now running all this stuff about Uranium One.
Yeah. And see, sir, I have another question. You see, sir, you talked about the Catalans and the Kurds and people like that have the right to have their own country through the UN Declaration of Independence and all that.
Yes.
And see, sir, I've heard one man talk about the UN. I forget the guy's name, but he said the UN Declaration of Independence and human rights and all that UN stuff doesn't apply to the Catalans and the Kurds because, see, the Catalans and the Kurds are not being occupied. That law of the UN, Universal Human Rights, was made after World War II to give the rights for people under colonial rule. To see if the Kurds and the Catalans, and also so we have the same thing in Canada. We have like the French people in Quebec. They wanted to separate, have their own country. We had a referendum like in 1995, and they lost it. Anyway, so if the Catalans and the Kurds want to have their own countries, and also they have to make a deal with the governments in those countries. The United Nations has nothing to do with.
Well, I disagree. I mean, certainly in the case of Spain and Catalonia, that's a classic example of colonial rule because Catalonia used to be an independent nation and was captured by Spain. And so I think that definitely...
Oh, I didn't know that, sorry.
Yeah. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go and switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I have a question for you that I've been wanting to ask you for some time, and I just haven't yet. But here it is. Is Trump really a warmonger, or is he basically doing what he can do as far as his actions not going into war, but he's letting the military-industrial complex, beat the dog with the stick, or at least try to?
Well,
I mean, I don't think it's so bad, but what is he doing? Could you tell me?
Well, basically, again, Trump campaigned on an end to U.S. interventions in other countries. We were going to stop being the policeman to the world. Certainly, the military-industrial complex, all the defense contractors, they were not happy with that. They want not always the reality of war, but the threat of war, because it stimulates their business. Now, there's nothing in Donald Trump's pre-White House background to suggest that he himself was a natural war hawk and aggressive, but he is a money man. And right now, I'm sure he's being told that the quickest and fastest way to get the U.S. economy running again is with another series of wars, because that's what worked in 1907 and 1929. And unfortunately, it makes the economy great for the purveyors of war machines at the expense of everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I do respect the fact that you are holding Donald Trump's feet to the fire, and I think that more people need to do that. But I think that I don't think he's nearly as bad as, say, Obama or the Bushes were. I think when we look at his actions, I don't think they're quite as bad. And I think that, who knows, maybe he may be in the process of getting us out of Afghanistan. And maybe he's doing his best right now. And we need to continue to hold his feet to the fire, but we also need to sit back and say, recognize his accomplishments. I mean, even with Hillary Clinton and all the crimes of the Obama administration, if he is able to bring her to justice, and he may be able to, it could be at the point where enough of the American people recognize that our government is so corrupted that if they don't bring those people to justice, the people are going to, like you say, it's going to be a collapse. It won't be violent, but it could be violent, but there could be a collapse because the people just don't trust the government. So maybe there's enough good in our government left to say we have to prosecute this or our country's done. Does that make any sense?
Well, no, I understand what you're saying here. Unfortunately, again, this gets back to that issue of the narcocracy. And everybody who was involved with it understands that that is a secret which cannot come out publicly. And anything that gets close to Hillary Clinton or to the Clinton Foundation risks ripping open the cover-up back to that narcocracy and the CIA's gun and drug running out of Arkansas down to Nicaragua under then Governor Bill Clinton. And so that's what everybody's protecting. Even Hillary's worst enemies are going to be protecting that, because it does mean the end of the government, and it's the end of their nice, cushy, well-paying job. And that's what makes really for the best cover-ups, is where you get your own enemies working to help you keep that cover-up in place. And unfortunately, they are all tainted. Over time, a corrupt government gets rid of the ones who are not corrupt. Cynthia McKinney, good example. Ron Paul's another one. Like attracts like.
Dennis Kucinich is another one too.
Yep.
I thought Dennis Kucinich could have been a great president. But I don't know. I don't know. I think there's a chance. I hope there's a chance that maybe, like you say, that the foreign countries are actually publicizing Uranium One and writing articles about it. I'm hoping that, maybe our government there could be enough great people in our government, which is highly unlikely, to say, you know what, we have a choice. We can either save our country or we can save a dictatorship. I don't think the people are going to stand for it for too much longer. And, what are we going to do? And my next question to you is, do you think the Republicans have a shot at the midterm election? Elections.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to say right now. Apparently, the Democrats are still dealing with the fact that their donors have dried up. Their regular grassroots donors have pretty much dried up ever since that debacle with Bernie Sanders. Of course, I'm sure that Hillary will dip into that slush fund over at the Clinton Foundation and try and make it up. But at this point, I think there's two factors. Right now, because of Hillary, the Democratic brand is seriously damaged. And it's not just Hillary, it's Debbie Wasserman Schultz and all the rest of that. At the same time, I think a lot of Americans are very disappointed in the Republicans for, in many cases, obstructing things Trump was trying to do, such as Obamacare. So at this point, it's up in the air. It's hard to say. We obviously have another year to get through before the midterm elections, and a lot of things could definitely change.
Yeah, I'll just end with saying that I do think that maybe the military-industrial complex is basically doing what it is going to do, and Trump really may not be able to do anything about it, but maybe talk with them. I'm hoping his actions remain peaceful. Let me just say that.
Well, we'd all like to see that, but
serious.
that's not what we're getting out of our government. Now they're talking about going into Niger. Alex, we have to let you go and take a few phone calls. A few commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the corporate media is back to that whole condolence call nonsense. And remember, the lady released the full video that was being made when she took Trump's call. And she had him on speakerphone. You can hear both sides of the conversation. Very polite, very respectful. They're still out there churning this thing in their desperation to not have to report on Uranium One. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Mark in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thanks for letting me in. I wanted to speak about Trump, but I was hoping that he was a man that was sick and tired of paying politicians for permission to install a toilet. But then you see him, he'll meet a family and they'll have a little child, a 5 or 6 year old, and he'll ask him, what do you want to be when you grow up? Rich? It's like he worships money.
Yes.
I think that's what's wrong with him. He worships money more than anything else. And if he is true about the swamp and true about how he campaigned, he would flat out come out and say it. I have $20 billion, and every one of those dollars is a piece of the U.S. debt. In order for us to get rid of the U.S. debt, we have to get rid of this fake pieces of fiat currency that we use that we call money and go back on a gold or silver standard or an honest money system, one way or another.
Well, the last president who took that, the Federal Reserve on like that was John F. Kennedy with his U.S. notes, and we all know what happened to him.
Well, then Donald would come out and say, and I would love to do that, except the FBI and the CIA has shown me the video of John F. K. trying to drain the swamp. So it's not going to happen, people. At least come out and tell the people. I mean, it goes way back. Lindbergh tried to expose it.
Yep.
James Traficant.
Yep.
What a fabulous man. And they just eat him alive. And Donald, at least Trump, be an honest man, come out and say, hey, if I try to fix this without all of you, and I need every governor and every county commissioner and everybody helping me drain this swamp, except they're the swamp we got to drain. And that's what the problem is. He can't do it by himself, and he can't do it Congress, and he needs every governor and every county commission to help him drain this swamp, because this whole, the lawyers and the judges, and they're all in there, lawyers and judges, they are the swamp. And that's what he needs, and without us behind him, we got to do it. We got to be on the ground helping him, or no one's going to get it done.
Well, the best thing that we, the American people, can do is simply de-link and just say this government is not in compliance with the Constitution. Therefore, it is illegitimate. It is null and void, and I'm not going to fill out the paper forms anymore. I'm not going to give you the lives of my children for your wars. I'm just going to ignore you. Go bother somebody else. I have no intention of listening to anything you have to say because I've been made an utter fool of before the eyes of the world way too many times.
Well, even look at what's going on with the shooting in Vegas.
Yes.
There's no information coming out of all the dead people and all their funerals and 500 people in the hospital. Where all these? There's no information coming out. It's all, everything seems to be a hoax, and it's such a terrible thing that now I'm to the point where I don't believe anything anybody in government ever says to me.
Well, that was something else that George Carlin always used to say. He says, I never believe anything that the government says. I'm in perfect agreement. I never believe anything the government says these days. I never believe anything the corporate media says these days because I'm tired of being made a fool of.
Yeah, it's just a terrible situation. We've been raised because it started long ago.
Yes.
Since the day I was born, this lie has been on, and it's just hard to it's a hard thing to contemplate trying to fix. So thank you, Michael.
All right, well, thank you very much here. And we've got another caller waiting online, but we're too close to the commercial break. So we're going to leave that till we come back here. And again, Fox News is now reporting on the fact that Mueller is investigating Tony Podesta in the Russian probe. But again, what I think is going on is he's taking over that investigation to make sure nobody else can. We'll be back after these commercials. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media is going on and on about how Mueller's probe now extends across the aisle. See, we're looking at both sides now. We're investigating Podesta and all the rest of that. No, they're not. It's all for show. Mueller's investigation of Podesta and or Hillary will be as phony as the Warren report was. All right, let's get on back to the telephones here. James in Texas, you've been very patient waiting on the line. Thank you very much. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Yes, you're right. The best thing people can do right now is disconnect. Not only disconnect from the system, but become your own central bank, because nothing's really going to change. What is going to change, though, is you're going to start seeing them try to do everything they can to make sure that you don't have a buffer. Like, for instance, with the demonetization of our coinage, like the best story that you could tell people is probably ask them, what is the difference between 1964 gas, 2000 money?
Well, obviously, the difference in prices between the 60s and today is all about inflation. Because that's how the Federal Reserve tries to deal with much of the debt, is trying to simply inflate that debt away. And it results in higher prices for us. And the problem is that prices are going up higher than wages and salaries, and that's why the American people are suffering so hard.
So do you see them, I get, because there's a lot of Goldman Sachs people up there, right? So what do you think is their plans now? What do you think the plan is, once this?
I don't think they have one. I think that's the problem. I mean, this whole Federal Reserve System was set up to extract all the real wealth of the nation and put it in the pockets of the bankers, but nobody had a plan for what to do when they succeeded. And that's why they're thrashing around right now. And a lot of it is just, all this paper, imaginary money. They're trying to pretend the derivatives problem has gone away. It has not. And at some point, it is going to start coming apart. And we're hearing some very respected economic experts are saying the red lights are flashing, that no amount of instantly created money poured all over Wall Street is going to keep this hoax going much longer. There's going to be a panic, and there's going to be a run.
Once you see them demonetize, once you see them devalue the nickel, then that is going to be the basically red flag for everybody, because the nickel is the last bit of real money any normal people have to gain. Because when you think about it, copper is really it's what the working and poor use. Silver and gold were more and more international. Yeah, you would get those if you were working good as a laborer or in a good job, but copper is really the thing. And once you see that nickel change to like a ceramic, or something.
Well, we've known that ever
Why
since
would they?
They took all the silver out of the coinage, and even the silver content, nickel content in the nickel is in decline. It's now an alloy with other metals, just like there's no more real copper in the penny. It's an aluminum alloy that's been plated. And they're trying to make the money imaginary rather than actually carry value. And the next step is to say we don't need all these coins. The next step
their excuse is it costs too much. Their excuse is it costs too much. And it only costs them a couple of million, but that's a drop in the bucket when they're spending hundreds of billions and trillions. That's how you know they're trying to take any safety net from normal people. That's how you could tell right there. So I think that's the red flag too, right there. That's going to be a big red flag.
Well, we know
we need to just save and get into tangible.
We know the safety net is fraying at the edges. We know that Social Security is tremendously underfunded for the expected outflows that are going to happen as more baby boomers finally retire. All of those social safety systems They're eroded. These government agencies that are supposed to be looking out for the welfare of the American people, they're not doing their job. SEC turned a blind eye to Bernie Madoff. Minerals Management Service ignored the fact that the Deepwater Horizon's manual blowout preventer was 4 years overdue for required annual maintenance. So they're on the side of the corporations, and they let the American people just deal with the aftermath, the fracking fluids in the water, the tap water that catches on fire, radiation in our food. They simply don't care. It's all about grabbing more money. And like Putin said, you know, when a nation loses its moral compass, when it loses its ethics, ultimately the devastation is worse than being hit with a nuclear bomb.
That's why they need to, once they lose control in this collapse, we need to realize that getting paid for maintaining our equipment, that the payment is the clean water, the electricity, the running roads. Even though we may not have a monetary system, it's not going to be like that forever. But before we get that, we need to understand that that's our payment, maintaining these infrastructures, because that's the payment, is the clean water, the roads, the electricity, you know.
We have to have a good infrastructure.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think
you're welcome. Thank you. We're going to let you go here. But, yeah, we have to have a good infrastructure to support efforts to reindustrialize, to support non-GMO agriculture. But unfortunately, and again, we saw this in Flint, Michigan, decisions are being made without regard to long-term consequences. It's just get it working now. You know, I need to look good for the next election. And that was basically it. And there's way too much of that thinking going on at all levels of government, where they're not really thinking, what is this going to be like 10 or 20 years down the road? Good example would be all these so-called green alternative energy systems that were being promoted alongside human-caused global warming. And they've cost huge amounts of money in subsidies. They've never penciled out, and most of them are starting to break apart because they weren't built to any quality to begin with. All right, let's go to Frank in North Carolina. Frank, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to point something out. The search terms to find this story might be Fox News. I don't know for sure if that's Fox News like Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, or if it's some other Fox News, but I don't know if it's Radio Fox News Division or whatever, but they had to apologize. Navy SEAL. They had some guy on. They were promoting him as a Navy SEAL, and I don't know what his spiel was, but they basically had to apologize because somebody heard it and knew the guy was not a Navy SEAL, had never been a Navy SEAL, and they didn't like it, so they started causing raising a stink over it, and Fox had to come out and apologize. Yeah, the guy, we made it up. The guy wasn't a Navy SEAL, but it just goes back to what we were talking about with a caller, 2 or 3 callers ago. I don't believe anything that I see. In fact, just because the mainstream media is putting forth a news story, that is enough reason for me to wonder, okay, what are they trying to do here? Because, it's mostly agenda-driven. Like you say, the only thing they really ever get right that you can count on is sports scores, and that's after the game. They're reporting the score after the game is over, and I don't care about those anyway. They usually get the weather wrong. The other stuff is agenda-driven, and even when they're trying to get it right, they're so lazy and so inept, they usually get major details of the story wrong anyway. So anyway, some guy, you run into these stories every now and then with these guys claiming to have been a Navy SEAL, and a lot of times they're lying. You always want to ask for absolute proof. DD 214, something like that. If somebody's telling you they were a Navy SEAL, they probably weren't. It takes me back to when I was really irate, though, when they were promoting, they were having this one or more Navy SEALs on promoting, the idea that they had killed Osama bin Laden.
Yes.
Last time, whatever year that was. That really pissed me off. And, the guy's going around and he's people are basically throwing parties for the guy, and he's a big hero and everything. And it was all freaking, in my opinion, a pack of lies.
Well, that's the corporate media's stock and trade. They're not here to tell the truth. There's no law that says they have to tell the truth. And they do lie. That's what they're paid to do by their owners and other people with influence, whether it's the U.S. government, the Israel lobby. They're here to sell you the next illusion you are supposed to believe in to get you to do what somebody else wants you to do. I mean, the corporate media has declined a long way from the days of Edward R. Murrow. And even when Edward R. Murrow had the courage of character to stand up against Joe McCarthy, a lot of people in his own industry said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go up against the government. You don't want to annoy them. They won't let us on Air Force One or some such similar nonsense. But the fact is, right now, the way the corporate media is organized, anybody with ambitions to be a new Edward R. Murrow, they're not going to get hired in the first place, or they're going to get shoved over on, the science desk, or they'll be let go under some other pretext. Because the corporate media is the ministry of propaganda, and that is their job. And again, the laws that said the U.S. government cannot propagandize the American people have all been rescinded. And the authorization to propagandize, meaning lie to you, the American people, was reasserted in, among other places, the National Defense Authorization Act. So they're out there openly admitting, yeah, we're lying to you, but it's for your own good. Just trust us, it's for your own good. You need to believe as we tell you to believe. And they're having a hard time of it.
Yeah, it's for your own good. Believe the lies. You'll be happier. All right, I'm out.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And to sort of go on back here, earlier this month, Fox News featured this story about a highly decorated veteran, Navy SEAL, served in Vietnam, earned 2 Purple Hearts, and hand-carved a presidential seal that he wanted to give to President Trump. But last Thursday, the network had to issue a correction about the veteran, John Garofalo, and said that all of his claims turned out to be untrue. He's never been a SEAL. He did not serve in Vietnam. And apparently the medals he had, he picked up in a curio shop. The only real medal he legitimately earned was the National Defense Service Medal, and everybody gets one of those. But that's what Fox News does. They're out there creating these people. Ooh, this is an authority figure. He's a SEAL. He served in Vietnam. And they got called on it. And we need to be ready to call them when they lie and say, look, you're lying to us again. And we really don't like it. Now, I had high hopes for Fox News after breaking the Uranium One story, Lou Dobbs especially. But the way right now they're back on the condolence calls and Niger and the rest of it, I'm starting to think that somebody has yanked the leash over at Fox News as well. Remember, this story, this Uranium One story, could rip open that entire narcocracy, that guns, drug running, money laundering scandal going all the way back to 1980s Arkansas. And that really is a threat to the continued existence of the U.S. government. No American citizen is going to support a government that has been selling illegal drugs to our kids, which is exactly what they were doing. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Fred in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to do a little chapter and verse about some things leading up to where we're at today, if you don't mind. I did a lot of research into what happened at the end of World War II, and I realized that quite a few things took place. Obviously, we were told that we won World War II, but unfortunately, the Nazis had dug themselves in down in Antarctica, and they were able to develop their flying saucer technology, for lack of a better way to put it.
Okay,
and
well,
there was a field of events.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here at that point. And I know we all saw it on What on Earth. There's a feature in Antarctica that looks like some kind of a giant hatch, but it's not seen in clear enough stuff. There's no question that the Nazis did develop a lot of amazing technology, and all of it was pillaged by the Allies at the end of the war, including the original wire recorders, which led to tape recorders. That was a German invention. And, of course, the V-2s became the foundation of America's missile program, along with Dr. von Braun and his team. Little known fact about the Apollo spacecraft It was fueled with chemicals that were basically the same ones developed by the Germans for their rocket-powered interceptor plane, hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. So, they did some amazing things. Flying saucers? No. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. All right, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's get into some of the news from the world of computers. Apparently, there is a new computer bot network that is being built around the world. They're saying up to 1 million organizations have already been infected. This is coming from cybersecurity company Check Point. And they've spotted this new botnet, which is enslaving Internet of Things devices, mainly Internet routers and remote cameras. And research is suggesting the new botnet is evolving at a rapid pace, meaning it's spreading rapidly, and could soon be weaponized to launch cyber attacks in the same fashion as Mirai last year, potentially saying that somebody could turn a switch and shut down the Internet. Now, I wonder who would want to shut down the Internet right now. Certainly anybody who feels the Internet is a threat to their agenda, is a threat to expose the real scandals that are going on. Or they may take down the Internet and use it as another false flag. Oh, it's those gosh darn Russians and Iranian and North Korean hackers. They did this to us. The war is on. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Doing fine.
You shut that guy down pretty fast. Hey,
well,
Antarctica.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the Germans did explore the use of Antarctica as a base, but it never went anywhere.
Well, how would it go anywhere? I mean, number one, you have to bring in everything you need to survive.
Yes.
I mean, just number one. You know, I mean, it's just such a silly notion. Anyway, so
can you stay on the line,
Al?
Can you stay on the line because
sure.
we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Al in Canada, and we're talking about some silliness that's being thrown out there because right now the corporate media and the government are trying to find some way to discredit the independent media to try and lure people back to the official view of everything. And one of the tricks that I like to use is called poisoning the well, which is you just put a lot of nonsense out there. No plane at the Pentagon, the Apollo moon landings were faked, chemtrails, HARP, and all this other nonsense as well. So we occasionally get some calls along those lines. And yes, I'm very quick to dismiss them and hang up on them because they don't make any sense. Al, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I'm glad we've talked about this before. I'm glad you do that. I mean, it's just, you can't waste your time with these fools. But like more importantly, you were talking about these botnets and obviously with today's technology, and it is amazing. Processing power is it's astronomical now when you actually think about it. These new Ryzen chips that have come out from AMD, I mean, they actually give people the power to do multitasking that even just 5 years ago was just beyond belief, and it's so cheap. I plan on building one at Christmas time, of course, when everything goes on sale. But it's just getting easier and easier to do these sorts of things. If you want to be, go out there and be a troublemaker and rabble-rouser or, whatever you want to call these people. Or, they're working for somebody, right? And it doesn't matter how much this stuff costs because they're going to have it anyway, right?
Well, right now they're not paying for the hardware they're using. They're infecting Internet of Things devices. And it's just like the NSA using your computer to spy on you. They're not having to spend any money to do that. It's also a violation of the Fifth Amendment.
That's running rampant, too.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it is out of control because right now, frankly, the U.S. government is scared that the American people are waking up. And they're desperate to find some way to send all of America back to sleep. Give them all a blue pill and so forth.
what about the processing power of these cell phones? I mean, is there a malware bytes for a cell phone? And if there is, or like what's that other spyware software? I actually use it. I can't think of it.
Spybot Search and Destroy.
Yes. Do people even know about these things? And they're walking around with these phones, and we all know that as these updates become more and more available, a lot of their battery power is being drained. Well, what's going on? It's not just the apps, but what are the apps actually doing in the background?
Well, again, the latest thing is hackers will get into the servers of a real development company, and they'll replace the download with one that's contaminated with more malware. And it is a huge problem, and apparently the U.S. government is totally unconcerned. Al, we're going to let you go. We've got to do a station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go to Kathleen in Paris. Aloha, Kathleen. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Something you said earlier, I think it was today, about Hillary maybe getting unhinged and angry like we know she can do, and threatening to, because she's got all the dirt on everybody and the drugs and whatnot. Don't you think that if she made the first little threat to do that, I mean, the deep state didn't really care about her. If she made a threat like that, wouldn't they just take her down?
Well, you have to take into account the existence of a dead man switch. People who are operating at that level, where they are blackmailing people, they don't have the blackmail information on them. It's usually hidden in multiple locations under the control of multiple individuals who have agreed that if anything happens to Hillary Clinton, they will dump all this stuff on the corporate media, or failing that, the independent media. And a lot of people have dead man switches. Vince Foster had one himself. His mistake was leaving it in his White House office safe, where it could be gotten at.
You're right. I forgot all about that.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Tom from Philadelphia called on in and said, Malwarebytes makes a version for Android. It's a subscription, $12 per year. And definitely, you ought to have some security on your cell phone, because the cybercrime is totally out of control. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, you were talking about the media does not try to tell the truth. They're not even supposed to tell the truth, which is true. Lately, things are changing, like in a lot, like on YouTube. I've noticed you used to be able to, like, if you wanted to find out something, stuff would pop up that exists, but now, I don't know what demonetizing some people or something. They have to be monetized, or they've changed their protocol or something, but you're not getting you used to be able to get a lot more alternative news on YouTube, but now it's not.
Oh, it's being buried way down at the bottom of the search lists. Same thing with Facebook. Reddit is now blocking and censoring any posts about the Clinton-Russia Uranium One deal. It's just a banned subject on Reddit.
Yeah, even Reddit, which was supposedly just for controversial stuff, I think. I mean, I never was on Reddit, but that was my impression. But now YouTube used to be pretty free. They'd let whatever people wanted, they give it to you, but now not anymore. So I don't know what's going to happen, but this deal with Hillary, the guy, the informant, has a gag order. He can't say anything.
Yes.
Non-disclosure agreement. But they could change it. Sessions could change that with just by a stroke of a pen, but he's not doing it so far.
No, he's not.
Then they can. That's what they're waiting for. If he can start talking, then he'll talk to Congress. Then Congress will call him in, and But I don't know what's going to happen. Even the Republicans don't want to go after Hillary. It's a sad thing.
No, because she
Like,
knows where all the dead bodies.
believes
Hillary knows where all the dead bodies are buried and how they got to be dead bodies, and she's got the entire government by the throat over that CIA gun and drug running down to Nicaragua back in the mid-'80s, out of Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton down to Nicaragua. All of it illegal, violation of the Bolin Amendment, violation of the Logan Act, guns down, and all of it paid for with cocaine coming back into the country. That's a scandal that if the American people had to confront that on a mass basis, that would be the end of the government. Nobody is going to listen to or obey a government that is itself the largest smuggler of illegal drugs, the largest seller of illegal drugs in our own country. Who would listen to that?
I think everybody already knows they're a bunch of crooks, but I still think we've got to get Hillary, put her in jail. That was the thing that got Trump elected. Lock her up, lock her up. That's the reason I voted for Trump.
Yeah, that's the reason I supported him too.
And
he's
let me down so far. Okay, I'll let you
he's
go.
been a tremendous letdown. The fact that Sessions is not rescinding, not voiding that gag order on the FBI informant tells us a tremendous amount. I've talked before that there are two levels of secrets in politics. There's the little ones that are fodder for campaigns like Anthony Weiner and what he was doing, and as bad as it gets, it doesn't threaten the system as a whole. Then there are the great secrets, the ones that if they become known by the public would bring the entire government crashing down. The truth behind John F. Kennedy, the truth behind 9/11, the truth behind the Russian uranium deal, the truth behind the Clinton Foundation, the government-sanctioned drug smuggling and drug selling in our own country. Would make it very obvious we don't just have criminals in government, we have a criminal government, period, end of discussion. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And the Russiagate hysteria is starting to almost become a caricature of itself. Every bad thing happens blamed on the Russians. And now they're out there saying, well, it was the Russians who turned this previously pristine and beautiful Internet into its own sewer. Look what those horrible Russians did. It's tacky. All right, let's take a phone call. Willie in Nashville. Aloha, Willie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Right on. Cool. Man, I was curious. I had like a two-parted question, please. And the first part is, what is your opinion on YouTube censorship? And a secondary first parter to that, what is your opinion on moderators in chat rooms censoring people that they don't agree with?
Well, I'm opposed to censorship. I support that First Amendment. And the reality is that YouTube and Facebook and Google have all been co-opted to become the gatekeepers for all discussions on the Internet, and I'm opposed to that. Because if you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have democracy.
I completely agree. The second part of my question, and I'll get off, and I thank you for what you do for what it's worth. I'd like to give a shout out to the Ron Gibson channel, who this is how I watch your show, and Lisa Hauserman, who is a moderator. She's a sweetheart. She's awesome. And then there's another moderator who censored me. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to get a dig on them and let them know they're a hypocrite. And I thank you for your time. You have a good afternoon, sir.
All right, same to you. Thank you very much. But again, the upside of all this obvious, visible censorship is that it is obvious and it is visible, and Americans are taking note. Okay? And I've just been reminded from the control room the United States is a republic and not a democracy. Well, you still can't have a republic without freedom of speech. But what the United States is supposed to be is a republic with a democratically elected leadership. That's the design. But if you're being told you can't talk about certain things, you can't criticize Israel, you can't boycott Israel, then we don't have freedom of speech. We have permitted speech, and that's not the same thing at all. Now, going on over to Madagascar, they are having a huge problem with bubonic plague. And some doctors are even warning nobody is safe from the disease. Tourists are being warned to keep their distance from areas where the infections are running wild, but they're coming up on a point where they're going to have to close their borders. Now, Madagascar does get bubonic plague every once in a while, but this is a major, major outbreak. So far, it's killed 97 people, and doctors are saying it's continuing to spread and worsen. And if you remember your history, bubonic plague is what killed an estimated 50 million people in Europe during the Middle Ages. And it spread from the rural areas to the more urban areas not usually affected. So it's a very serious situation over there. And, of course, the real concern is that somebody who is infected with bubonic plague will leave Madagascar and go someplace else and start a new outbreak there as well. And I'm sure the depopulation people are out there saying, yes, yes, do it, do it. Now, the other day we were talking about how the CDC had admitted that between I'm looking at the years here. Anyway, about 98 million Americans received polio vaccines back in the 50s and 60s, contaminated with the monkey virus SV40, which is linked with cancer. And there was a surge in cancer following that period, most of it blamed on cigarette smoking. Well, observers have now pointed out the CDC has now deleted that page. Because after all, the CDC can't say anything that makes vaccines look bad. No, 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 no. We're here to support and enhance the medical industrial complex. And as long as we're talking about population wiping diseases, there's a new danger being presented by synthetic biology. And like any other emerging technologies, it can be used for good, it can be used, unfortunately, for bad. Now, the most recent dual-use concern about synthetic biology involves one of humanity's oldest foes, smallpox. Smallpox was eradicated from nature in 1980, and all known stocks of the virus are located in very well-protected vaults at the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States, and the Vector Institute in Russia. However, a Canadian scientist funded by the American biotech company Tonix has demonstrated the ability to create a smallpox virus literally from scratch. Okay, why is this guy being paid to do this? Why is he even agreeing to do it? Very, very nervous over there. All righty. Now, over in Colorado, as you know, there's still a lot of political fallout from the legalization of marijuana. And everybody's out there saying, oh, no, it's going to be terrible. It's going to lead to more crime and car accidents, and none of that has really happened. What it has led to is a decline in profits for big tobacco and big alcohol, which is really what the stink is all about. But they've noticed, and this is reported in Reason magazine, is that prior to the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, they'd had 14 years of rising opioid deaths. Since legalization, it has dropped 6.5%. That, I think, is a good thing. Now, here's a very alarming story. This is over in the BBC. Steep rise in self-harm among teenage girls. And they're commenting on how, since 2001, girls have had much higher rates of self-harm than boys, 37.4 per 10,000, compared to 12.3 per 10,000 in boys. Now, it doesn't sound like it's really a lot of numbers, but you still have to wonder what's going on where these girls and boys will inflict harm on themselves. And we're talking about, just cuts to the skin, nothing major. We're not suicide attempt. But it's still weird that it's going on. And so the University of Manchester was looking at this data for nearly 17,000 patients and trying to figure out why all of a sudden this increase. Well, the answer is found in an article over in USA Today where high antidepressant doses were linked to self-harm in youths. Kids were put on these drugs, and all of a sudden their inhibitions are gone, and they just say, yeah, it'll be fun to take a knife and turn my arm into a tic-tac-toe game or whatever. So for the study, Miller and colleagues looked at the health records of 162,625 privately insured people aged 10 to 64 treated for depression with the three popular antidepressants best known by the brand names Celexa, Prozac, and Zoloft. And they otherwise compared similar patients based on the intensity of their depression symptoms, previous self-harm, and other factors who got either typical starting doses or higher doses. The typical starting doses were 20 milligram a day for Celexa and Prozac, 50 milligram a day for Zoloft. After a year, children, teens, and young adults were twice as likely to engage in deliberate self-harm if they started at the higher doses. Such acts were especially common in the first 3 months. No such link between starting dose and self-harm was found in adults 25 or older. So there's something going on in the brain chemistry. So another article we got from The Guardian is talking about how antidepressant prescriptions in England have doubled over the last decade. There's your cause. That's why more of these kids are inflicting self-harm on themselves. More and more of them are being put on these drugs because they make money, and things that make money are wonderful. Now, this story, we commented on it last week, but I want to come back to it again because this has caused a huge amount of backlash. And this has to do with several cities in Texas, including on the application for disaster relief to people to rebuild their ruined homes, including a clause that says you will not boycott Israel. You affirm you have not boycotted Israel. You will not boycott Israel. That's in the agreement. And a lot of people got very angry saying, what does this have to do with the hurricane disasters and the fact that these people have lost their homes? Now, over at the ACLU of Texas, their legal director, Andre Segura, says that this clause is an egregious violation of the First Amendment and was basically reminiscent of McCarthy-era loyalty oaths requiring Americans to disavow membership in the Communist Party and other forms of subversive activity. Now, the First Amendment protects America's right to boycott, and the government cannot condition hurricane relief or any other public benefit on a commitment to refrain from protected political speech. This has really annoyed a lot of people. There's been a huge pushback, and apparently all this actually began with Texas Governor Abbott, who signed a law saying that we're going to oppose and block boycott, divestment sanctions at any and every opportunity. Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. And it is having a tremendous pushback, where people are saying this was completely inappropriate to make a promise to not boycott Israel a condition to get your disaster aid. I imagine that next election, Mr. Abbott may find himself out of an office because this has really angered the people of Texas. For one thing, it sends a clear message. Governor Abbott is far more concerned with Israel than with his own state. And Governor Abbott's first duty, as is true with every state governor, is your state and its citizens. That comes first. Everything else comes on down the line. And so a lot of people got very, very angry about this one. And they should. And it underscores the fact that, yes, we are living under foreign puppet rule. Washington, D.C. is a Vichy government ruling us for the benefit of Israel. And that's just the ugly reality. We'll be right back after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Joe in California. Joe, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to let you know my experience with SSRI-type medication that was given to me after I underwent a series of 3 operations in 2000, the last of which was at Stanford here in California. And I was left with constant stomach pain and constant diarrhea. And the only thing the doctors would give me was some type of an SSR-type medication. I got the patient information sheet from the pharmacy. I said, I can't take this. There's not one good thing listed on there. I told them that. I told them I wasn't going to take it. And they said, well, that's all we can give you. And of course, I knew that was a lie, but they were basically done with me.
That seems like an inappropriate medication to be dealing with post-surgery pain. But unfortunately, a lot of stuff is being used off-label. When Claire was dealing with her joint issue, she was given this very, very powerful medication that wasn't really approved for pain management, but they just gave it to her anyway, and we paid for it, and that was, kind of, it was highly addictive. Claire it was really rough for Claire to get off that stuff, and it didn't help the pain. The only thing that helped the pain was when we figured out for ourselves that it was exposure to formaldehyde precursors in low-end household and cosmetic products, and we got rid of those, and the pain went away. So, again, just
good,
like everything else.
I didn't get any relief until I got back home to where I live, and finally I went to a local doctor, and he helped me out with some pain medication that not only took care of the pain, but the narcotics in it that would make most people constipated merely made me normal.
Well, that's good. That's a good doctor.
Local doctor here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let you know about that, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the call. We're going to let you go. Here's the reality. Small medical offices, the doctors are really going to be much more concerned with treating you, getting you healthy, because word of mouth can make or break a small medical operation like that. The large hospitals and medical centers literally grade the doctors on how much money they bring in, how many additional services or drugs or tests or whatever that they sell. And doctors who aren't churning out the cash find themselves being let go. That's how absolutely mercenary it has become. We're going to go back to the phones here. Sherry in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. There's another dimension to this, people that are on antidepressants. I learned this a long time ago, and I think it might be helpful just to kind of stick it in here somewhere. This, when treated for depressions, different people have different personalities that play a part, and there are shell people who kind of hold everything inside and take criticism very personally and retreat within and blame themselves. I used to be kind of a shell person. Just realizing it kind of helps. Now, they can be depressed by put-downs, tapes that are played, being told they're stupid, lack of popularity, and social media stuff today could play a large part on that. And they tend to, hurt themselves and blame themselves. The other personality is the in-your-face people. Mm-hmm. And they attack outwardly other people or institutions. That's mostly men, although it's not strictly by gender, but I'd say for the most part it is, that you're in-your-face people. I've learned to be a little in your face, but it's better for me in the long run, But anyway, I just thought I'd point that out.
Okay.
It's a very serious problem. And
well, these chemicals, they mess with your head. And again, if you go over to ssristories.com, you'll read a bunch of them. I had one experience with these many, many years ago, just after I'd broken up with my first wife, Broadzilla. and I had a very bad reaction, and I will not touch those ever, 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 ever again.
No, I know. My husband took them, and he'd give them to me once in a while because he said I'm acting like a bitch, and kind of got me on them. But it took 24 hours to get off of it after my divorce. But I felt like pounding my head against the wall all night,
Yeah, I know how that can be.
After that one, yeah, it's like I had to hit my head. Okay, I'll go.
All right.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
taking my call.
All right. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I want to step back in the talking points to the Uranium One deal because it looks like the Senate probe is really looking to do a job here. They're now asking whether Robert Mueller alerted the Obama administration to the Russian bribery scheme, because now it's come on out that the FBI knew it was ongoing, that they were investigating it, and they knew about it before the uranium deal went through. And so now the Senate is trying to find out, well, who knew or did not know that there was a shadow hanging over the Uranium One deal. And that's going to be a very, very awkward question, because the FBI can't say they didn't know. That's been documented. They did. And they were obviously obligated to inform everybody connected with that Uranium One deal that there was an issue. And if they did, then everybody who was involved in that uranium deal knew that there was a problem. There was bribery involved, and they went ahead and did it anyway. So this is huge corruption, extortion, bribery. This is the biggest scandal and the biggest cover-up that we know of in U.S. history. And already we're seeing in the press articles coming on out saying that, well, it looks bad, but really everything Hillary Clinton did, it was legal. Our experts have looked at that, and they said there's really no there there. You're just, it was all very legal, maybe in poor taste. It was all very legal. Let's get back to Trump and Russia. So they're really pushing that as hard as they can. All right, getting on back to the world of computers. Apparently, there was this problem with the DDD exploit being used in widespread malware attacks. And the problem is DDE is a Microsoft legitimate feature where if you have an email and it's got a link, it will go automatically update the link when you open that document. The problem is if that link has now been infected with malware, you are now wide open. Now, you can get around it because if you go into the Word program, under Options, there's actually a little checkbox, Update Automatic Links at Open, and you uncheck it. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Uranium One.
Should be on your mind.
To me, it's just another distraction. Well, it's just another distraction, Mike.
Distract from what?
Anytime they want.
Distract from what?
From everything else that's not happening.
This is the
Look,
big.
The State Department can stop this anytime they want. I mean, it's not a big secret. You can't do anything like this unless the State Department says it's okay. If this thing isn't like a horse out of the barn and they can't catch it, they can stop it in its tracks. So, I mean, it's just more media for, to fill up the media airwaves.
I disagree. The media is trying to ignore it. So far, NBC and ABC haven't reported on it at all. CBS gave it one whole minute of coverage. They're not putting this out there. The reason Uranium One is out there is because we in the independent media on the Internet are making this a major issue, and we have to keep doing it. Everybody listening to this broadcast needs to get these stories out there and share them with everybody. Share them across social media. Email them to your friends and family. There is very clearly a major effort at a cover-up going on here. That's why you have Reddit is now literally blocking, censoring any posts at all that deal with the Uranium One deal. There is really something there, and we need to get at it.
Okay, Mike. Okay. Then the State Department and other top government agencies are infiltrated by the Russians, because this could be stopped by the State Department tomorrow. Thank you for taking my call.
Okay, well, you're welcome. But the issue here is that the FBI was investigating attempts at Russian infiltration. Okay, but I'm sure they would welcome that opportunity to say, oh, see what Trump did. He's in collusion with the Russians. Unfortunately, this points at Hillary Clinton and her people. And again, as I mentioned before, about the same time this deal was going down, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, worked very hard to get 10 arrested Russian spies released and sent back to Moscow. And that right there tells you she is being controlled. She is compromised. Because everybody who's involved with that Uranium One deal, they are wide open to blackmail by Russia. We all have to keep this story out there. The corporate media wants this to go away. Certainly the Democrats want this to go away. The Clinton Foundation wants this to go away. They're desperate to convince you there's nothing there. It's just another nothing burger. Let's go back and talk about how the backlash to the NFL kneeling thing is ruining the game. I don't even care. I'm not a big football fan. There is a real issue here. And by the way, you remember when Watergate first broke? And with the exception of the Washington Post, the rest of the corporate media were out there saying, it's just a burglary. There's really nothing there. You don't want to pay attention to this. We have much more important things to talk about, like Richard Nixon's re-election as President of the United States of America. And it wasn't until you actually started seeing indictments handed down against some of the players that the rest of the corporate media said, I guess there really is a story here, and they fell into line. The same thing is going to be happening here. The corporate media is desperate to try and pretend this is no big deal, that there was no illegality, that it was all perfectly normal and above board, and they're going to go on with that posture until somebody actually does get indicted, and then it will really heat up. But I'm in agreement with those who say this is the biggest scandal, biggest political scandal in U.S. history. And it certainly has all the hallmarks of a cover-up. We've had this story on the independent media for months now. And Fox News finally got around to it a few days ago. And CBS waited 5 days and they did an hour on it. NBC and ABC still won't touch it. They absolutely won't. It's an horrific scandal, selling 20% of the United States uranium ore, the core material for nuclear weapons, to Russia at a time when we're all being told Russia is our dire enemy. And this gets me back on to the issue with the email server and how much of a cover-up they have around that, how they're trying to block it and not let anything go there. Because behind that email server, I think there's another record-setting scandal, that of a sitting Secretary of State betraying the nation by using her weak email server, private email server, to share classified documents with foreign interests in exchange for donations that poured into the Clinton Foundation. And there is a precedent for this because back in 1994, when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, he used his authority as president to authorize the transfer of very sensitive technology to China, and at the same time, Chinese money was being funneled into his re-election campaign. The scandal was called Chinagate, and it should have been investigated then. But unfortunately, the email server at the White House suffered a failure and a crash, and there were no backups. We can't let this one get away. All of you, you Rivero's Rangers, you need to grab these stories and you need to put them everywhere that you can. Email, social media, everywhere. We have to just force this into the public light. And we can. We did it with the Downing Street memo. And it looks like we're succeeding on this one. And with the American people scared of their own corrupt government more than anything else, they're going to be paying attention. They're going to be reading this thing. This is a huge, huge scandal. Hillary Clinton ought to change her name to AFAB, AFAB, anything for a buck, because that's certainly the way that she was running herself all the way from Arkansas of the 1980s right up to the present day. And she may be out there saying she doesn't plan on running for president again, but she's clearly campaigning. More than just justified by the book. She was on the Graham Norton show Saturday. They gave her half the program. to whine and cry about how unfair it all was that she was not the president. So she's out there. She's doing everything she can to remain in the public eye. There is a reason over and above the book. Now, getting on back to the world of computers, Google's Pixel 2 XL has developed a very serious problem, and it's only just been out for a little while, just a few weeks. This is an 800-pound cell phone, and it has a serious burn-in issue that wrecks the screen. Now, for those of us old enough to remember cathode ray tubes, burn-in was a serious matter, that if your computer just sat there with the monitor and there was something along the bottom and it was there long enough, eventually you'd literally see it in the face of the screen even when the power was off. And that was where screensavers came to be popular, to try and, keep the screen constantly in action so there weren't any burn-in issues. But in the advent of digital displays, burn-in has never been a major problem. But on this screen, which is apparently a new technology, after just a few weeks, people are seeing the permanently located menu bar ghosted in front of any other full-screen applications. Didn't they test this thing? I mean, this is clearly a design problem, not a manufacturing problem here. Now, a lot of people have been talking about the crack Wi-Fi vulnerability, and it turns out that it's been around for a long time. It's been around for 13 years, but it was hiding behind a corporate paywall so that ordinary people who didn't have enough money to get through that corporate paywall couldn't find it. And this is having to talk about the WPA2 standards, which was based on IEEE standards. And it's been broken. WPA2 is not secure. The question is it intentional or not? Because we know the NSA can't really break encryption. If they don't know the method, there's not a thing they can do about it. Even the FBI is now saying that they have 7,000 devices that have been seized as part of various investigations, and they can't get into them because of the existing encryption. So we know the NSA has been backdooring all of our devices, and this is what the cyber criminals are finding: the backdoors, the deliberately weakened passwords. They're actually destroying the internet and its usability with all this nonsense. Now, apparently, over in Palestine, there was this construction worker, and he posted a selfie leaning against a bulldozer, holding a cup of coffee and a cigarette, and he posted the photo on Facebook with "Good morning" in Arabic. Israeli police, relying on Facebook's translation service, believe the post said "attack them" in Hebrew. When they translated it into English, it said "hurt them." So Facebook's translation is apparently not very good at all. And apparently the Israeli police did not consult any Arabic-speaking officers. They instead relied completely on Facebook translation. And so this Palestinian man was arrested. No word that he's been released. Nasty stuff. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. John in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, it's about the Oregon farmer out there that had his property taken. It was enriched with uranium, and the orders to take those people out was given by the top of the FBI, the leader of the FBI, and that has not been brought up at all as to why this property was seized.
Well, actually, it has been brought up before that originally it was the Bureau of Land Management went on in and said some concocted story about protecting endangered species, and they were going to just simply confiscate the land. because if they tried to buy the land, the owners of the land would say, well, we've got a lot of uranium under here and the price is going to be that much higher. So it's a lot easier to just snatch the land for free, kick the people off, and make it part of the parcel that was eventually sold to Uranium One, which in turn was eventually sold to Rosatom.
Right, and then this was all under the Obama administration, so, and that's a big concern. And I've heard, too, that Mueller was one that delivered the uranium on the tarmac to the Russians, too. So Mueller, that hasn't been brought up on Fox News. They talk about other people, but he is, the people that are running this investigation now are all involved with the Uranium One, and I do think it's a very important.
Oh, they're all compromised. I mean, it's a huge conflict of interest. They shouldn't even be there.
Exactly, right. And then they're avoiding, they took all of this pedophile stuff off the main press, too, but I think they're all important. They're all tied together, I think, because of the Bushes, the Clintons, and Hillary, and Bill, with, what's his name, the guy that had the Lolita Express?
Jeff Epstein.
Very, very nasty. And yep, yeah, so all of that stuff is just still in the background, and so there's still hope that all of that will eventually get exposed too. Patience, I guess, is what we have to have.
Well, I'm running out of patience here, and like I said, everybody listening to this program, you grab all these stories about Uranium One scandal and you post them everywhere, all your social media, all your email lists. We have to keep up the pressure on this because very clearly the deep state and the corporate media want this one to go away. Oh, let's go talk about the condolence call again.
Right. Well, no, this is very critical. And, I myself, my feelings with the Russian people is not, I don't have any, I'd say strong animosity against that country. They've been, they kicked the bankers out, and he's trying to do something with his food source to be clean. I think it's not necessarily the evil people that we're told to watch out for.
No, they're not, and Putin right now is seen as a master statesman around the world, and people have a lot of respect and regard for him. Not so Donald Trump. Donald Trump just fell into this swamp thing thinking, and he's out there making more wars. He's violating international law. He's breaking treaties the U.S. has signed. And the end result of it is nobody's going to trust the U.S. government anymore. Anyway, John, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program
Thanks, Michael.
After these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program on this Monday here. And stepping on back to fake media, just got this article from Activist Post, and they're talking about how CNN has been caught creating fake news again, adding words to a Syrian witness statement to fit the Western narrative. And the CNN reporter was trying to attribute the horrors facing the civilians as a result of the eastern part of Aleppo being under siege by the Syrian military, not the fact that terrorists had seized East Aleppo and were fighting to the death to keep it. And then he quotes this older man who paints a less than typical CNN-style portrayal of the rebels. The man says, I wanted to leave with my kids 15 days ago, but the rebels shot at me and said, hey, you bastard, do you want to join the regime? It was really surprising. This actually did air on CNN. The interesting part is what was attributed to the young boy that CNN quotes as saying, we were afraid that we would starve to death. We were also scared because of heavy bombs that were falling, trying to make it look like the boy is worried about the Syrian military's bombs. However, the translation of the old man is not only inaccurate, the second half is completely fabricated. They just made it up out of thin air because, hey, that's their job. Their job is to sell you the next war, the next candidate. Didn't do so well on that one last year. Getting on back to the world of computers, apparently Ultima Software, which makes the popular L Media Player, and the download manager folks basically admitted that the latest versions of these two apps came with an unwelcome extra, the rather horrid OS X Proton malware. This is for Macs, not PCs. All those Mac users running around convinced that they're immune from this stuff. No, it isn't. And apparently this malware was injected into downloads of the legitimate applications from the developer's own servers. And it was spotted by security shop ESET, which alerted El Media. And basically, Proton is a remote control Trojan designed specifically for the Mac systems. It is almost impossible to remove, and the recommended course of action, if you get this Proton malware on your computer, is reset it and reinstall. That's how bad this stuff is. Meanwhile, over at Kaspersky, they're still trying to deal with this smear campaign by the U.S. saying that Kaspersky antivirus is stealing data and spying on people. And that's the NSA's job, by golly. And Kaspersky is saying, we'll allow you to look at the source code. We'll open it up to a third-party review. We've got nothing to hide. Well, we're not interested in looking at your source code. We already know the Russians are evil. Apparently, Amazon has filed a patent revealing designs for ultrasonic wristbands that monitor your job performance. In other words, if you work for Amazon, they will be watching and monitoring you at all times to make sure you're not goofing off or going to the bathroom too much. I wouldn't work for a company that did that. Anyway, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I actually do have an appointment to take care of this leg that's been bugging me for a couple of weeks, so hopefully I'll be a little less gimpy tomorrow. So please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow here on Republic Broadcasting. So until then, aloha, America.